Hey guys, how's everybody doing? It's been a few weeks since my last video, and I hope everybody had a good Christmas and New Year's. Last video I made, like I said a few weeks ago, was my top 10 albums of 2017, and I've got quite a backlog of new finds to show. The one I decided to do today is they're all online purchases, and they're all from the last month or so, and let's get started. So first of all, what we got playing in the background is a classic, Moody Blues, Days of Future Past. Sometimes I just get in the mood for Moody Blues, and I end up, it tends to go in streaks for me. There'll be periods where I'll play no Moody Blues, and then there'll be other periods where I'm constantly playing their albums, and when it's their albums, it's usually the first 5 albums I'm talking about. Days of Future Past. So as I said, these are all online purchases. The first one, my favorite jazz musician of all time, Miles Davis. This is a best of compilation of Miles called The Essential Miles Davis. I've had this on CD before, which is actually an expanded 2 CD edition. This is just a double LP, so a lot of the songs are missing, but Miles Davis in my area here is pretty hard to find on used vinyl, so a lot of times I'll have to come up with purchasing reissues, and I thought, you know, since this is so hard to find and I've got a lot of Miles on CD, I want to really get a nice cross-section of Miles on vinyl, and how can I do that sort of in one swoop, and this is probably the best album to do that. So it dates all the way back to I guess the 40s. Yeah, the 40s. There's a song on here that's a Charlie Parker song that Miles is on with Dizzy Gillespie, through to the Birth of Cool era. Then Miles' first quintet, his second quintet in the 60s, leading all the way up to the Fusion period, and then of course when he made his comeback in the 80s, there's even a song from that period as well. I got a couple of Miles vinyl from my wife for Christmas. They're both from the same period in the 50s, the period of Miles and his first great quintet. So the first one here is Steamin' with the Miles Davis Quintet, and this is the period where Miles had Coltrane in his band, and I guess that's the most notable name in the band, along with Red Garland, Paul Chambers, and Philly Joe Jones, but certainly Coltrane is the most recognizable name. And this is Miles and his band doing a lot of standards, very accessible, very straightforward jazz. A great starting place if you're just looking to get into jazz. It's none of this free jazz or anything like that. Very accessible, but still Miles and still quite awesome. He tends to play a lot with muted trumpet on these records, and very little with open trumpet, which I prefer the open trumpet, but it's still Miles and it's still fantastic. So that was Steamin' with the Miles Davis Quintet. The next one is Relaxin' with the Miles Davis Quintet, which again is with the same lineup with Coltrane, and still a lot of standards being done. And again, he did 4 albums in this series, which I think dates back to about 1959. I had seen a video from Lisa, I think it was back in maybe December, late November perhaps, where she showed this album, and it really reignited my my liking of this band. I mean, I've always liked this band, and her and I have commented back and forth about this band a few times, but when she showed this record, it just got me on a streak of playing and trying to acquire on vinyl, because most of my albums for this band I have are on CD. I only had a couple on vinyl, but she showed this record. This is upside down. Z from My Morning Jacket. This is My Morning Jacket's 4th album, and this is where their sound changed a little bit from the, I guess, traditional alt country roots sound But I think it's their best-selling album actually, and it's a fantastic album. I've had this album since it came out, and like I said, had it on CD. Then I saw her show it, and I ended up getting this. I felt like I had to have it on vinyl. Of course, the well-known songs off of this record are Wordless Chorus, It Beats For You, Gideon, and if some of you guys watched the show American Dad, there was portions of Wordless Chorus. They had a whole episode that was based around My Morning Jacket. Check out YouTube. That was actually quite a good. I'm not a watcher of that show, but I certainly watched that episode on YouTube when I heard My Morning Jacket were on it. The album that I ended up purchasing as a result of Lisa's video, My Morning Jacket, was actually an album of theirs I only had a download of, and was probably at that time my least favorite My Morning Jacket album, which is the album that followed Z, Evil Urges. But now I can say, having this on vinyl and really getting deeper into the album, this is an amazing album. I've always loved the song "Smokin' From Shootin'." That was always my favorite song from this album. But this album has a really cool soul kind of feel to it, both in the music and also in Jim James's vocals. He sings a lot in falsetto on a couple of tracks here, which really gives some of these songs a soul feel. Let me just pause, that's my phone. Sorry about that. So as I was saying, Evil Urges, it was my least favorite My Morning Jacket album, but now I don't know where it falls amongst their albums. There's some great tracks on here, the title track, and again I was referencing the American Dad episode. The main song from this album, Touch Me and I'm Gonna Scream Part 2, was heavily featured in that episode of American Dad, and it's just fantastic because Jim James' vocal on that track is just stupendous. And you know, the character on that show, I can't remember the character's name, but he refers to Jim James's vocal as angelic, and that's what really captures him and makes him go crazy over My Morning Jacket. And an album of theirs that I've always loved, and was actually the first tour that I saw them for, was for this album, Securital. So this was the album after Evil Urges, and like I said, I saw them on this tour actually twice. Once when they were doing their own show, and once when they were part of the bill for Americanarama, which was Richard Thompson, My Morning Jacket, Wilco, and Bob Dylan. And then associated with My Morning Jacket, I started listening to some songs from a solo album from their lead guitarist, Carl Bramel. And this is his second solo album, 4th of July. Very much My Morning Jacket sounding. There's actually a couple of members that help him out on this album. So Carl does lead vocals and guitars and keyboards and all that kind of stuff. In My Morning Jacket, he's the lead guitarist and does some backing vocals. But on this, he does lead vocals. He gets help from Bo Coaster, who's the keyboard player for My Morning Jacket, and also from Tom Blankenship, otherwise known as Two Tone Tommy, who's the bass player for My Morning Jacket. This is quite a good album. I was surprised by this. So Lisa started that for me by getting me reignited on My Morning Jacket. But another album that she showed, it might have been in that video or another recent video of hers, was one of her favorite artists, Neil Young, and the album Hitchhiker. And I've been kind of humming and hawing about getting this album for quite some time now. I'm a fan. I like all of Neil's work, but my favorite Neil stuff is with Crazy Horse and the Harder Edge stuff, the stuff on Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere, stuff like that, Cinnamon Girl, Down by the River, Cowgirl in the Sand. That tends to be my more favorite Neil Young, the electric stuff on Rust Never Sleeps. But I decided to go for this, and boy, it was a good decision, because even though this is mainly just Neil, an acoustic guitar with some harmonica on a few tracks, and I think piano on one track, this is excellent. This was recorded as, I believe, demos back in 1976, and this is just fantastic. It includes 3 songs that eventually appeared on Rust Never Sleeps: Pocahontas, Powderfinger, which are 2 of my most favorite Neil songs, and here they're very much in stripped down versions. Even though Pocahontas on Rust Never Sleeps was an acoustic track, Powderfinger is quite different on here. That was an electric track on that album, and Ride My Llama is another great song from that album on here. But this is fantastic, and look at this gatefold, it's just stupendous. Look at that, it's just an amazing package on this. I say to Neil, keep putting out stuff like this, and I'll keep getting it. So that set me on a real Neil kick for a while there. So I was playing a lot of my other vinyl records of his, and then I also picked up this album, which is Neil Young and Crazy Horse live at the Fillmore. I believe this is from 1971. And just look at that bill. That is just crazy. Neil Young and Miles Davis on the same bill. And as if that wasn't enough, look who was playing the rest of that month or week at the Fillmore. Just crazy stuff. And so like I said, this is from 1971. The highlights on this, there's some unbelievable dual guitar attacks on this that are just fantastic. It's a single album, so it's not the full show, but there's just some crazy guitar on here from Neil Young and Crazy Horse. Then a band that I've shown many times before, one of my favorite bands out of the UK back from the 90s. 2 of my favorite albums of all time, Definitely Maybe and What's the Story, Morning Glory by Oasis. And I've had all their singles on CD when they came out. They used to put out singles with the lead track and then 3 B-sides, which were unbelievable. And it was those B-sides that there was high demand to put those B-sides together on an album. And this is the album, Oasis, The Master Plan, which includes 14 B-sides, which is really from the period of Definitely Maybe up to and around the Be Here Now period, which is really the prime era Oasis. 14 tracks, excellent double album. Fantastic. It includes an unbelievable version of I Am the Walrus, which is really the first time, I hate to admit this, the first time that I heard the song I Am the Walrus was the Oasis version live. I was like, what is this cover song that they're doing? And eventually getting heavily into the Beatles version, and now that is my favorite Beatles track. And I don't like it because Oasis did it. I was introduced to the song by Oasis, and now it is my favorite Beatles song. But this is an unbelievable B-side compilation by one of my favorite bands of all time. And I did follow Oasis throughout most of their career, but as things got towards the end, their last album, I actually didn't even buy it. And it was one of the albums that I didn't have on CD, and I was really looking to see a vinyl release of that album, which finally came in the last year or so. So I picked it up. This is Dig Out Your Soul by Oasis, which was the last album that they made before they broke up, or I think it was around 2009 they broke up. So this was maybe from 2007 or 2008. This is a great album. They went out on a high note as far as records are concerned. And then when I did my 2017 top 10 albums, at number 10 I had the debut solo album from Liam Gallagher. And I made a comment that Liam's album was much better than Noel Gallagher's album, because they released albums very close together, about 2 months apart. And at that point in time, I'd only heard snippets of a couple of songs, but what I'd heard, it didn't sound like Noel to me. So I immediately shunned the album and didn't even consider buying it. I had the first 2 Noel solo albums on CD, and Pretty Green Vinyl guy, who's a big Oasis fan, he made a comment and kind of said, you got to give that Noel album a chance. And I gave it a chance, and guess what? It's an awesome album. I actually like, this is Noel Gallagher and the Flying Birds, Who Built the Moon. And I actually like this album now more than I like Liam's album. And that's saying a lot, because I'm typically a Liam Gallagher guy versus Noel. You know, it's not that you can't like one or can't like both of them. Of course you can like both of them. But there was something about this album that took a little bit of time with it to sink in. But, you know, sometimes great albums are like that. Like, they take some time to sink in, and you've got to give them a chance. And, you know, repeated listens, it pays off. And this is a fantastic album. Like, I've been seeing a lot of interviews about how he made this album, where he was working with producer David Holmes, and how Holmes didn't want Noel coming in with pre-written songs, and that they put everything together and wrote everything in the studio, and it really forced Noel to do things quite different. And I think over the course of 3-4 years, because he was making this album at the same time that he made his previous album, Chasing Yesterdays, I think it paid off in the end. And I think Noel's most proud of this album and the final product. So thanks, Pretty Green Vinyl Guy, for suggesting that I take a second look at this album, because it certainly paid off, and I'm loving this album right now. Okay guys, thanks a lot for watching, and I'd appreciate any comments, and see you next time.